the years, whatever the game, the Red Army's passion is always the same. Decades pass, now we rise anew. Rovers fans, this part is for you. We won the cup, we ruled the league. A grand final win made us all believe. The world took note with Brisbane's fall. The Robins superb, now we won it all. Red Army, let's hear you sing with all your might. For your world champions in the red and white. We are okay, and we are the champions of the world.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Robin Pod Weekly, which is of course brought to you by Budget Tyres Auto Centre, the only car specialist trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of the world famous Hull Kingston Rovers. And then once again, we've got another bumper episode lined up for you. Steve Till joins us for Robins Revisited. We look at question time and we answer the big question. And of course, we look back at that Challenge Cup defeat against the Wigan Warriors. Look forward to Super League with Wakefield Trinity. Up next, joining me to discuss all things Hull KR is Scott Solway for the first time this season and Robin Pod regular James Perlin. Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening, John. Evening, Scott.
Evening, James. Good to see you both.
Yeah, of course, we've got lots to get through. But before we kick off talking about Hull Kingston Rovers, Scott, we had, over the last couple of days, the sad passing of John Kear, of course. Legend is a word that's bounded about quite lightly at the moment, but I would say firmly a Rugby League legend, synonymous with the Challenge Cup in terms of some of the victories that he's had. The most enthusiastic Rugby League person, I would say, going at 71 years, he was still going strong. Of course, he did this commentary on the BBC, and it's so sad to hear that he passed away on the back of that Challenge Cup final commentary because, you listen to all the tributes that have been paid at the moment, Scott, all the former players who've played under him, just fans of the game, just can't hire him. Have held him in such high regard. Such a sad time, John, isn't it? Sorry, Scott, when people like John Kear depart the game because he was Rugby League through and through.
He just loved the game, didn't he? He loved the game at any level. He was a decent player himself back in the day as well, as a fullback, a centre and a winger for Cass. I remember him scoring that try against Rovers in the '84 Premiership final at Headingley, and he put Cass in the lead. But he was just a good man. He was a Rugby League man, be it at whatever level the game was played at. And from all the tributes that I've read about him, everybody has just said that his inspirational skills for any player were beyond belief. I saw that Chev Walker had posted a lovely tribute to him on Facebook, just saying that it was the way he put an arm around players. It made you feel top of the world. No matter what quality of player you were, it made you feel as though you were the best player in the world. And over the years, he's got some fantastic results, as you mentioned, especially in Challenge Cup finals. I think that Sheffield-Wigan result will go down in history. He's got some fantastic wins as a Challenge Cup, but he was happy to coach in the lower leagues as well, wasn't he? Even battling in more recent times. So he was just a Rugby League man. And I was privileged to speak to him a couple of times. When we'd been in the restaurant at Rovers and he'd been working for the BBC. I'd just been at a game observing, and he always had time for the fans. If you called him over, John, can we have a photo? Or John, can we have a quick word? Always came over, and he'd stand for ages talking about the game that he loved. It's a really, really sad loss for Rugby League, and such a great man. Let's hope that John now rests in peace because, he's left a lot behind for the game of Rugby League, without a doubt.
Yeah, and James, you coached Sheffield, Huddersfield, Wakefield, Batley, Bradford, Widnes, England, Wales. Hearing them that commentary back now, if you watch the highlights back of the Challenge Cup final, I suppose it's even more poignant, isn't it? Because they were pretty much his final words in terms of what were broadcast. Someone who Scott quite rightly said, just synonymous with the Challenge Cup, synonymous with Rugby League, and what's really become apparent is, like Scott said, he had time for everybody, and you saw that with his coaching, that he wasn't afraid to take up a challenge, and I think that was because he just loved the game. He wasn't necessarily someone who was probably chasing a wage. He was chasing his love for the game and filling that void for him when he wasn't coaching was probably more important than what level of rugby league he'd be coaching at. So it's just a sad moment really in rugby league, because there's no doubt whatsoever he'll be remembered for a long time. And I wondered, James, about a tribute. You know, we've talked about how we could pay tribute to someone like him, and I wondered if there's, you know, maybe you have the Lance Todd Trophy, you know, for the play of the match. I wonder if there could be a coach's medal, maybe a John Kear coach of the match or something like that to pay tribute, because he was a fantastic coach. He really inspired players. He got players to play. He got players to play, not only play rugby league, but to run through brick walls, pretty much. You know, players who literally stepped up. So, yeah, what do you reckon? What do you think would be a fitting tribute, James, to the late great John Kear?
Oh, it's a difficult one because, like you say, it was just, you know, I just loved listening to his commentary. It's tremendously sad news when I heard about it, and just the passion for the game and the love for the game just came through in every commentary he did. He, you know what, no matter who was commentating on, you could tell he just loved the game. And like I say, it was just like reading all the tributes and hearing all the tributes to him was just like, you know, it's just so sad. And I think, you know, maybe something like for in the Academy Grand Final, something like that, you know, so they play the match award in the Academy Grand Final, because, you know, he's, like I said, he was a supporter of every level of the game. You know, there's people just saying he would just rock up on a Sunday morning watching the kids play. You know, he just wanted to be involved in the game, and, you know, and just the inspiration he gives to young kids, and some of the stories I've been reading this the last couple of days just shows what an absolutely wonderful person he was. You know, will be very sadly missed. I think, you know, something like that, you know, where, like I say, yeah, coaches medal or something like that, but, you know, maybe something for the academy, for the young kids.
Yeah, and I think, Scott, as well, like there's some voices that become synonymous with the game, isn't there? Anywhere in, you look into the Super League era, you know, Mike Stevenson and Eddie Cummings. You look at Ray French, you know, John Kear is up there in terms of just them voices that you just when you switch on the TV on a Sunday afternoon to watch a Challenge Cup quarter final or you know, John Kear's up there with that, let alone the fact he had such a fantastic career in terms of coaching rugby league. So it's a really sad moment, isn't it, Scott? And you know what surprised me as well, Scott, is you'd imagine when I looked at him, although he was 71 years old, he looked like he was in the prime of his health, and it's a real sad moment, a great warning to everybody as well, isn't it, about your health and stuff like that. We don't know what happened, but, you know, someone who's probably as fit as what he is, it's a scary time, but yeah, it's a sad time as well.
Yeah, it is, and as I always say in the kind of work that I do, you know, it's when none of us know when our loan's due, do we? None of us ever do. I'm sure John went to the cup final on Saturday, never even dreaming or believing that it might not be with us the following day. You know, so, you know, it's that big thing in it. Live life now, live in the moment. Don't worry about tomorrow. It'll take care of itself. What John was, he was a very eloquent man as well. You know, you didn't watch a replay on the BBC and then he just described what happened in the replay. It covered detail. It broke down what player had done what and who had won this and the reason this happened and the reason this move came off, because it was a very, very clever, articulate, eloquent man. And his knowledge of the game was unbelievable. And I have to say, you know, there were some commentators, love them or hate them, that they just go through the process sometimes. Whereas John, he described things to an absolute T. And when he described what was happening in front of you, you could see exactly where he was such a good coach, because he could see it happening in front of him himself, and he loved passing that information on, you know, to the TV audience at home.
Yeah, no doubt. He was a great
Still on
storyteller.
that, Scott. I think those are my thoughts about Ellie today. Just the way he just explained it to everybody. Even people who are not familiar with the game, they could understand what was going on. He would explain it in such a way that they could enjoy. Everybody could have felt part of enjoying the game, and that's probably part of his overall legacy.
Yeah, no doubt whatsoever. Great storyteller, and of course, our thoughts, our prayers, our wishes are all with the family and friends of the late great John Kear. Okay, let's move on to the last game that John called, which of course a Challenge Cup final, a 40 points to 10 defeat for the Robins. James, I mean, we're a few days in after the Challenge Cup final. Mixed emotions because, of course, as much as we enjoyed the Robins being there at the Challenge Cup final, we didn't expect to see the Robins necessarily lose, let alone the fact the scoreline was so emphatic in favour of the Wigan Warriors. What's your emotions? What's your feelings a few days after the event now?
It's so sad what happened. I think they just get hammered, for some unknown reason. They just get hammered. You look at Vegas, that happened in Vegas. It was just I think one of those days where we just had the collective off days, and a few 50-50s and bounce the balls and things happening with Dino getting injured, going off for HI in the face after 3 minutes. Didn't help to the heat and everything, but I just can't put a finger on it. It was just I think we've got to give total credit to Wigan. I think they came in and they did a job on us at the end of the day. I think I saw a post from somebody, a Wigan fan, on the forum, and said actually you should see that as a compliment, because they basically took what happened at the grand final and said that ain't going to happen again. And that whole, I think if you look through the games this season, there seems to have been building to get that Challenge Cup. That tough quarter final against Wakefield, which I think Wakefield were probably the favourites in that one, and they basically they beat them. The hammered Saints, and they did a job on us. And full credit to them, no complaints on the day at all, really.
Yeah, I mean, James, we'll look at some of them.
Unexpected, I think. It just seems we don't play very well at Wembley over the year.
Well, I was going to say, Scott, if you look at our record at Wembley, even when we've won, apart from probably 1997 when we beat Hunslet, we never seemed to play well. Even the Warrington victory last season wasn't a great performance. It was job done, but it wasn't a great performance. And maybe Wembley weighs heavy on the shoulders of the Robins. There's so much expectation sometimes when they get there, isn't there? And I've seen the Robins play there a few times now. I've not obviously seen the games in the 80s, let alone the 1964 final. But for whatever reason, Scott, Wembley does seem to weigh heavy on the shoulders of the Robins.
Yeah, I've seen every performance apart from 1964. That was the only one that I wasn't at. But even when we've won, even the 1980 final wasn't a great final. I mean, there was a lot at stake there, wasn't there? I mean, you don't want to lose that game, but it wasn't a great game. And Rovers didn't play that particularly well then. Then you've got Cass, Witness 81, we get beat. Cass 86, we get beat. And every time we turn up at Wembley, apart from the plate final against Hunslet, bearing in mind we were a division higher than Hunslet at that point as well, we just don't seem to play very well at Wembley, even though we've got 2 or 3 wins there. It's one of those places that does seem to weigh heavy on Rovers for some reason. I don't know why that is, whether it's lack of experience of playing there on a regular basis, I don't know. But I thought we'd have learned a lot from the Warrington game last year that we could have taken into this season's match. But saying that, the conditions and everything were the exact opposite, weren't they, on Saturday from what they were for last year. And James is right. Wigan did to us on Saturday what we did to them in the grand final in October. It was like roles reversed. They can get out of their end, they can get out of their 20 or 30. They struggled to do it on many occasions in the grand final, and then they did exactly the same to us on Saturday. They were hell bent on winning the Challenge Cup this year. They wanted to get at least one trophy back off us, and they've got one so far. But it's how we always respond now. It's how we respond and carry on with the rest of the season.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that later on because, of course, we face Wakefield on Saturday in the Challenge in the Super League. Some people suggested, James, that the game was lost on the coin toss and then the subsequent decision from Elliot Minchella to play the way that we did. Of course, unless you was at the game, so people watching the pod on YouTube and listening, unless you was at the game, you probably won't realise just how hot it was in that stadium. Like, I was sat in my seat, absolutely sweltering, sweating buckets, let alone the players who were out on the pitch having to do, to play rugby league. And I think that first half, for me, the Robins being in the sun for a lot of the game, did seem to sap so much energy out of the boys.
Yeah, it did. I was watching them in the warm-up because I think when they were warming up on that sort of on the left-hand side, as we looked at it, there didn't seem to be a lot of shade. So I think that might have had a factor. Whereas at the Wigan end, there seems to be a lot more shade because of the way the ball came around. So I think they were able to sort of benefit from that. Whether it had an effect, I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist or not, but I think it was just the heat. I think it was the heat at the end of the. It's a hot. There's no air in that bowl at all. You can see. So as we were sat in the front row, and we were there from like 1 o'clock. It was just absolutely sweltering. So like I say, goodness knows what it was like for the players running around in that. I don't know. I think there's probably other factors that played in it then rather than that. Because I think if you look at that first half, I think if you look at that first probably 25 minutes, I thought it was probably fairly even. I thought in terms of the scoreboard, I think I think we did quite well to actually hold them out for as much as we did. So you're getting towards half time, and then it just sort of, for me, there's a pivotal moment when we had a chance to take 2 points when we got a penalty at 4-0, and they spurned it and went for the try and lost the ball on third tackle, and I think that was probably the big turning point.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Scott. Let's look at some of. I mentioned the weather there. There was other mitigating circumstances, wasn't it? The fact that the Robins had been lining up with Carl Lawton starting for the first 15, 20 minutes of the game, like Mickey McAlorum did last season. The fact that he then didn't play that role, I do think had a massive effect, as did Jai Whitbread not lining up, as did Dean Hadley then going off after a few minutes with HIA. When you look at them three players as a unit, I'll combine them. They're three massive players who contribute so much to that middle effort, that defensive effort, that go forward from the middle. And I just think, when you start looking at the fact, there's a few, isn't there, where you go, and for me, them three players not playing the vast majority of the 80 minutes or what they'd normally be playing for the Robins, I think for me, that's where the game we really struggled because we had players like Sam Luckley, Jack Brown, of course, and Bill Leyland doing more minutes than they normally do. And we just went away from what we'd become accustomed to, what we'd been so good at over the last few weeks.
I think the thing is, if you lose one of those players, you can cover it. Two is difficult, but then to lose three, when we consider as well, probably all three of them might have been playing up to the back end of the week. Certainly, if Jai's missus had have had the baby, he'd have probably been there and played. And we know Dino was going to play. I don't know much about Lawton. I know he had some sort of rib injury, didn't he? But it was clearly fit enough to still be 18th man. That's what I can't get my head around. Or if he wasn't fit enough to play at all, why don't they just play Noah Booth as 18th man? At least you've got somebody who's fit. But so I don't know how unfit Carl Lawton was. But you're right. It's very, very difficult in those situations to lose three middles. Especially for me, Dino is a massive, massive link in that team because he can play prop, he can play second row, they can drop into loose forward, and he spells Tom Amon and he spells Jesse Sue as well. He'll drop in at prop while they have a breather. And we've got this system where, players are playing X amount of minutes, but then as soon as we lose one or two players, as you said, some players are playing more minutes than they should be playing in that heat and in that situation of a cup final in the heat of Wembley and in that ball. But, many would argue that you've got to have a squad that deals with that. it's a little 1%, isn't it? As I always talk about, you've got to have a team that can deal with adversity, fill the gaps. I don't know if we had that. We didn't, did we? It's proven the pack were probably steamrolled from minute one, if we're being honest. But we hung in there. I think Elliot Minchella, James Batchelor, and a few of the other players were scrambling like hell, especially Fairstaff, to keep us in the game. And they probably did more than they would normally do in the spells that they're playing at. And ultimately, it knackered us out, ultimately. By half-time, even though we were still in the game at 10-4, in reality, we were gassed. We were burnt out. And I don't think we had a lot left in the second half, which ultimately it proved.
No, and you're right to point out that scrambling defence, and then when you do that under the sunshine, like they had to do, the workload was massive, and I think there's a study that probably highlights the fact that some of the boys had to do so much more work than they'd normally be doing. Tom Amon, 59 minutes on the pitch, he was a top tackler with 49 tackles.
Yeah,
prop forward. You look throughout the season so far. He's not making that tackles, and people would say, "Well, yeah, he should be," but don't forget, he's also then got to carry the ball. A prop can't be doing all that work, and I think that highlighted to me actually just how much of a toll the son, the fact that Jai Whitbread won't play and Dean Hadley then got injured. I just think that really highlighted to me, and then let alone the fact that Wigan then made 56 tackle busts. Just shows you there's just the effort, the work rate that the Robins had to go through against, let's be honest, as much as the sunshine was red hot, Wigan Warriors were red hot. They were absolutely on the money that game. And sometimes, you do have to hold your hand up and go, look, the better team did win. There was a few mitigating circumstances. The first try, James Faramon going in on the back of a debatable call from Broadbent in terms of whether he had the ball stealed or not. Of course, the video referee gave an inconclusive call. But for me, as someone in the stadium, it looked quite plainly obvious the ball was ripped out. But what didn't help is that every single angle that they showed on TV was inconclusive. So, as the referee should have been able to make that. For me, I don't know if you agree or not. I thought that was a ball steal. I thought Broadbent couldn't do any more than what he did do.
No, given the conditions, in a wet condition, you probably expect that to sort of pop. You can sort of see balls popping out like that, but not when it's sort of that heat. The way it just came out. Yeah, like I said, there must have been some hand in there, and the fact that with it being only sort of fourth or fifth minute, they were prepared to sort of gamble a challenge on that shows that how convinced Broadbent was. Fortunately, I suppose they didn't lose that challenge, and it wasn't inconclusive. But as I said, they ultimately they went and scored from it, and it just basically capitalized. Ended probably not the best two or 3 minutes of the game, having Dino going off at the smallest at the same time. So, but I think after that, we dug in. You say it was a quick question of having to, and there was a feeling though. I had a feeling that every time Wigan had the ball, they seemed to be making yards at will, and we managed to keep them out. And you got to give the defence a lot of credit for that. But when we had the ball, we just couldn't get out of our own half, and it was just left to Mikey to hoof the ball up into the air and straight at Eckersley all the time to run it back in.
It was a play that was played out all the time. When we talk about holding our hands up, James, Scotland saying sometimes a better team won. I mean, that first try, sometimes, we looked at the Robins. I was watching it. I've watched it back so many times, trying to sort of almost pick out Rovers players and to say, well, why didn't they cover there? Sometimes it was just a great set piece. It was a great play from Wigan. And if you look at the Robins players, their eyes, the body positioning, they're all, maybe they're guilty of overcommitting to one side, but at the same point, nobody expected to see that. And the Lance Todd Trophy winner, Jack Faramon, went in and scored a great try. And sometimes you do have to just hold your hand up and say they were better than us in that position.
Yeah, I think we get caught out there, don't we? Somebody jump the line as well and goes in, I think, and it leaves
I
3
think
on
Jez,
2.
I think Jez goes to the left as they go to our right.
Yeah, yeah.
From scrum break. And I think that probably helps create a bit of the gap that fireman exploited.
Yeah, somehow ends up on 3 on 2 somehow, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, if you watch Jez Litton's following Jai Field, he's going 1-on-1 with him. As Field goes across, Litton then tracks him.
Yeah.
That creates then the space.
The gap goes the other way, the ball goes the other way, doesn't it? And it's inevitable. The try.
That's a great try, you know.
It was, yeah, good try.
They're a clever team.
Yeah.
I think there was another big moment as well, wasn't there? Well, there's a couple of big moments. We'll talk about this shortly. Mikey Lewis with his ankle injury. That high tackle from Harry Smith as well, though. I mean, any other day, I'm saying 10 minutes. They're saying, Scott, that it came off his chest and then his arm rode up into his face. There's no way that. And then what frustrated me the most was when he got both captains together, and I'm looking at it going, at what point have Rovers done anything to warrant both captains being called in for Liam Moore to speak to him? I thought the Rovers players didn't even react in terms of any aggression on the back of that tackle. It just seemed to be a really strange call. And I guarantee if that was a Super League game, Scott, that would have been a yellow card, 10 minutes in the bin. And of course, don't forget what's happened. It's gone to the match review panel and subsequently he's received copped a ban on the back of it. So it just shows that there was a decision to make on the field. And ultimately, Liam Moore, I do think it's a great referee.
Best referee in Super League. He really is. I believe he is. But
he got that one wrong.
He got it wrong. Yeah. Or the video ref gets it wrong. He's seen it, but the video ref has also got another chance to see that. And he's got to send some information to Liam Moore saying, look, he's cracked Tom Davis right around the chin. It's 10 minutes all day long. But they're trying to keep 13v13 at Wembley, aren't they? That's what they're trying to do, I think. They're sending off we'll come to, I'm sure they're sending off for Walters at the end, but the game's gone back then with 2 minutes to go. In that prime moment in the game, if they send Wigan to 12 men, it's 13v12, and I don't know. They try and keep players on the field at Wembley, don't they, as best as they can. But he should have gone at least 10 minutes, at least. I mean, he eats Tom Davis square on the chin with his forearm. I mean, as you say, any other game in Super League, it's a minimum 10 minutes in the bin, that. And then he goes and gets a one-game ban that is no benefit to Rovers. It's just, I don't know what's the disciplinary system in it. It's ridiculous. It's a fact, isn't it?
Yeah, and I tell you what, James, if there's any Wigan fans who have got the time to watch and listen to this, they'll probably tell us it's sour grapes. Jack Farramon's second try, we saw, of course, I think it was an obstruction. I think Minchella. I think what Minchella didn't do, though, do himself any favours, is how easy he went to the ground. I think he could have got a better decision by just maintaining his posture and keeping up. But it seemed to be too easy. But I genuinely do think he was obstructed from going. Yeah. And look, don't get me wrong, you've got your inside shoulder, outside shoulder, whatever. But he was obstructed from getting to the try. And also, don't forget, at that point, Mikey Lewis he'd suffered his ankle injury. He was then trying to fling his body the other way. And as good as Wigan was at running at pace, with power, a bit of guile, I do think that there was an obstruction there that stopped the Rovers players from being able to make that tackle.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it goes back to that set just before that when we had that chance to go take the two. We lost on the third tackle. Would have been an easy one for Martin. Suddenly it's 4-2. You've got a bit settling down, done. They come up the field, and then the score. But I think, you're right. I think Minchella went down too easily. I think if he just stayed where he was, he probably would have got a decision. Because 99 times out of 100, if that gets reviewed in a Super League game, it gets disallowed because there's been contact. Sometimes I know there was like in the past that sort of minimal contact was getting things penalised, but that was just obvious contact, and it would have, if he hadn't gone down and stayed where he was, it would have been disallowed. As sure as eggs are eggs.
Yeah, and Scott, despite some of the adversity, despite the weather conditions, despite the Robins not being at the best, we found ourselves 10-4 at half-time. A great kick from Tyrone May. We saw Peter Hiku show that elusive running that we seem to see from him at times, where he's able just to sprint onto the ball. He wasn't caught. He scored a try. And you've gone from, despair, really thinking, where's this game going to? We're back in it now. We saw the kick hit the post from Reece Martin, and that would have been so much sweeter if that had gone in. But at half time, you're thinking, we've weathered a bit of a storm. There's the potential to put Wigan into the sun now. If we can get a grip at, in the change rooms and set. That's so it was relief really at half time, and there was a lot of Robins around me, a lot of Robins in the concourse who were pretty happy. We've been through the storm. Now it's what we can do, and from where we was at points during that first half to be 10-4 at half time, I think was a great point, but it just never then materialised, did it? That second half sort of fight back.
It was massive who scored first in the second half, wasn't it? And if Wigan got the first score, we knew then we'd be up against it. If we'd have come out and nicked another try and levelled it at 10-0, then who knows? The Wigan still might have come out on top at the end, just in regard to levels of fitness and the work that we'd gone through. But as soon as it went 16-4, we were up against it because we had been first half, although we went in at 10-4. The first time we actually changed a bit of variation on the kick. Tyrone May kick over, Petter grabbing the ball. It had been very samey right up to that point. And the first time we change a bit of tact, we get a score out of it. I could never really get my head around first half. We kept putting the ball up to Eckersley and Field, if you like. That same bomb that Mikey does every game, which has worked for us. It's worked for us all last season. We won 4 trophies on the back of it. Playing teams in that 10v10. But if the kick chase isn't very good, there's no point doing it. Yeah. So, and you've got 2 of the quickest lads in Super League there, in Eckersley and Field, coming out of backfield with no pressure, and I couldn't understand why we'd just put ball to floor, turn them round and, make them pick the ball off the floor.
What became apparent to me, Scott, as well, is the especially the kicks from Lewis, we was good at getting that first chasing, but then what we're going to do is on the second play or the third play, put a 2 or 3 pass it, put it to the wing, and then that's where it started exposing us. And we made the effort in then first set, but first tackle, but we was that knackered. Then we couldn't then respond with the next follow up, and that, like you said, there was no then changing that. It just kept becoming the same, and that's where the scrambling defence came in, and that's where for me we just piled on ourselves. That workload, that effort, we seem to be scrambling too much on the back of just trying, going through the set game plan, which is tried and tested. But when you look at maybe the players that we had and all the players we were missing, maybe there should have been a bit of a differentiation. There should have been a bit of a change, something different, just to try and give Wigan something else to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised they didn't put anything to the other wing, to Hodkinson. Young lad, he's hardly played any games. Put a bit of pressure on him whereas you put it into Eckersley, as I said earlier, you just put it into there. It's taking it in the shade. There was no pressure. Like I said, no pressure on him at all because they're having to kick from so deep to clear our lines. But like I said, just try and vary it, put it to the other wing, and put a bit of pressure on the young kid. I just couldn't understand it. And it was very baffling. Even like I said,
and with the attacking kick, Hodgkinson, when he was exposed, that's when we did get a try.
Exactly. Yeah, when May put a little dink in, Hicker was able to get away from him and score.
Yeah, but Scott, I mean, as much as we got ourselves back into the game at half time, let's be honest, it was a bit of a masterclass from Wigan in the second half, wasn't it? It was just an onslaught. There was just, they were on the money. They were powerful. There was quick. There was decisive. And we didn't really have an answer to any of that. We competed. Do you know what? I never thought the boys didn't stop competing. I think they put 110, 120, whatever percent you want to put on it. The boys kept going. But we had no answer to Wigan with that onslaught in the second half.
you can't stop it as well. You know, once a team gets that momentum and the score, then the score again, and then the score, it's so difficult to stop. Doesn't matter who the opposition is. Once you get a roll on, it's really difficult to stop unless that team make an error themselves. Wigan hardly made any errors second half. I don't even remember them making an error, if I'm being honest. It was just clean, precise, and everything was to precision. It was a masterclass second half, albeit against a very, very tired Rovers team. But what Wigan did second half, you just got to tip your hat to that. You know, it was varied. There was lots of different moves, lots of different moving the ball quick through hands, moving the ball out wide. And we've seen it happened in Vegas. It happened at Wakefield away last season towards the end. And it happened against Leeds when they come to Craven Park last year as well. Any team, as you mentioned earlier, go from the second tackle or put ball through hands to 2 or 3 pairs of hands. We struggle against teams like that. Any team who've got a better pace and any team who want to move the ball against us, we're okay in the battle, in the fight. But once a team takes it to us and move the ball quickly and with pace, I think we really, really struggle against those teams.
Yeah, I mean, James, there is an issue there, isn't there? Because Scott said it before, when we're chasing the game, you know, we seem to struggle. And when we play a big game, and we're getting beat, we seem to not just get beat, we seem to get dicked.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, we don't just get beat. It's not a close. We seem to get,
it's a hammering. It's a hammering.
Yeah, it's hammering. And like, you know, we was there in Vegas, we saw that.
Yeah.
We've seen it, you know, in previous games. You know, look at the challenge, the Super League playoff semi-final against Wigan. When the Robins get beat, they seem to get beat by quite a lot of points in big games. And it's really difficult to put your finger on why. Yeah. But it almost seems like if we don't get them points in front early on and take control of the game, we've got no plan B in terms of being able to turn it around. Don't get me wrong, there's been the odd occasion where we have to, you know, let's be honest, in the Super League, there's been the odd occasion where we have to turn it around. But generally, if we're not in front and dominating from that first 15, 20 minutes, we find it very difficult to then turn the game around.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't put my finger on it. It just seems to be a real pattern. I mean, I look back at the league game the other week, and you know, we were probably on in it for 15 minutes. I mean, that could have gone the other way easily because, you know, we were under the pump that second half. You know, we were under the pump, and we managed to sort of dig it out and win it, which is, you know, sometimes you have to win ugly, and we did. And I thought, okay, that's going back. We'll get back on the horse, but it's just inexplicable, and how and why it happens. You know, it is. It's like I say, it's just, you know, like I say, Wakefield last year, Vegas, Leeds, you know, even Leeds last year away. You know, we're going to got absolutely hammered there. You know, we just sort of seem to be able to do it sometimes, and. I don't know. It come down to the fitness. I mean, you say it didn't come down to the fitness. Probably not, because we say they are a fit team. But you know, sometimes, like I say, when they get behind, it just seems to be, you know, just everything just falls to pieces.
Yeah, and Scott, like I don't want to start digging out players, but I do think there was a few players in that Challenge Cup final who've not necessarily covered themselves in glory, and what I mean by that is not about work rate, effort, but just some of the decision making and just, you know, some of the things that was just very uncharacteristic. And you know, I'm not going to single out players, but generally, Scott, I do think there was some players who've for whatever reason, whether it's the increased workload on the day, whatever it is, just maybe could have been a bit better with, you know, generally. That said, they're probably the same players who have brought us so much glory. And that's why I'm always guarded about what I say, because there's no doubt that these players run their blood to water for the Red and White Wilkinson Rovers. And that's what I'm really careful about sometimes, because I just think, that said, like, and there's no doubt whatsoever, if you listen to what Willie Peters said after the game, let alone us as supporters, he'll be tearing paint off the wall in terms of what he thinks, because he could tell he was not happy. He said that there was players who didn't perform the way that he expected. The team didn't perform. So I reckon there will have been some very harsh words. And thankfully, Scott, touch wood, time's gone by. When there's been an adverse result, there's always been a follow-up, a positive follow-up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we need to do. I've always thought that Rovers have 3 or 4 of these games in them in the season. You know, Saturday was one of them, as we mentioned, Leeds and in Vegas. They always seem to be big games, though, where we sort of like drop off a little bit. But we've always responded. We've always come back with a positive effect or a good result the following game. There's lots of mitigating circumstances about Saturday. It's not just ultimately Wigan were brilliant and we were very good, but there's lots of mitigating circumstances within the game, even before the game, everything. You know, so sometimes you just have to take it on the chin and say, look, put it to bed. The best team won by a long way, and we just have to move on and do our very best to get a result in the next game, which won't be easy, we might add. Obviously, where we're going is not an easy place to go on Saturday, as we all know. But at the end of the day, it's up to Rovers to respond, because the fans want a response, Willie will want a response, and I'm sure that the players themselves will want a response to what they dished up on Saturday. And as you say, it's not bagging players or anything like that, but there were players who didn't do their normal game, what they normally do. But I think Wigan had a big say in that as well, of course, you know. So.
Yeah, and James, they didn't need him, but it rubbed salt into the wounds, didn't it? Bevan French coming on.
Yeah.
I thought that's the last thing we need. And we saw, didn't we, as soon as he came on, he was looking for breaks in play. He nearly got a couple of tries. Of course, he scored one. I mean, if you look at the try he did score, the defence on that one, well, yeah, for me, it won't be in the highlights reel for sure. But when he came on, that's when you really knew the game was slipping away. I will pay credit to Peter Hiku, who does seem to turn up in these big games. 2 tries, an outstanding finish for that second try, by the way. Probably goes under the radar a little bit how he did manage that. Very few players in the red and white who probably, you know, you could say were really standout players, but I think Peter Hiku, Tom Davis, probably Tom Amon really did stand out. And then, of course, at the back end of the game, we saw probably one of the worst tackles I've seen in Rugby League over the last few years. Completely unnecessary when you look at the time of the game, you look at the context of what Bill Leyland was doing as well. Of course, we're seeing Sam Walters is now banned. Interesting, Julian Sember has got no case to answer. He's gone away scot-free, whereas some may say that actually his involvement was the real crucial bit in terms of Bill Leyland being ticked on his neck, on the back of his head. Thankfully, Bill Leyland seems to be okay. He got up, of course. You saw him, you know, rubbing his head, but he seems to be okay. But it just, I've seen some people say about whether it was to do with what he did at St Helens and whether it is a bit of retribution being handed out. We'll never know, will we? We'll never know in terms of the context of the game. But just a completely unnecessary tackle. And you know what? These are the things that I want the RFL to come down hard on, because they're the tackles that end people's careers.
Well, they end people's lives, don't they, as well?
Yeah.
Not just careers, the lives, potentially. It was an absolute shocker. I think Walter's got the red card, he's got the ban because he instigated it. But as you say, I think the real damage was done by December. I think when you look at it, he actually applies forceful pressure to Leyland's neck while he was on the ground. As he was going into the ground, he effectively pushed him into the ground, and it was an absolute shock. And I think, you know, I've commented before on other forums that this seems to be becoming an established tackling technique, if you want to call it that, for Wigan. You know, we had O'Neill in the grand final. We had the December one on Walmsley in the Challenge Cup semi-final. We had Essay doing it on Broadbent in the league game, and then we had Walters doing it, and Walters and December doing it on Leyland on Saturday. And then you're going in further, like you look at, you know, when what's his name, Barry Smith got done for the play Penrith, and Penrith when he got done at Castleford. So it's worrying that, you know, they're allowed to get away with it. You know, it's fine if it works, but there's such fine margins between it going catastrophically wrong. And I think it almost went catastrophically wrong on Saturday. And like I say, fortunately, Bill's okay, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, no doubt. And after all of that, Scott, did you have a good day out at Wembley?
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. We went Friday to Sunday. We had a few beers and we went round Covent Garden on Friday night and shared a few drinks and went for a bite to eat. So, yeah, it was spoiled by 80 minutes of rugby, but yeah, that's life.
Like Vegas.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's life. But yeah, it was a good weekend away. Look. Win, lose or draw, follow Rovers everywhere, don't we? Yeah. Well, we've seen a lot worse on the Challenge Cup defeat over the years.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So the people can have a dig at us over one you lost a cup final. Listen, when you've seen Rovers lose 51-0 at Whitehaven, don't worry, it's not a problem. I'm more than happy to lose the Challenge Cup final. More than happy.
Yeah, and of course there was big talk, wasn't there, about the. I think the attendance was the lowest involving two British or English teams since 1946, and I've been in two minds about whether the Challenge Cup final should remain at Wembley because, aesthetically it doesn't look great when you see so many empty seats. But what I would say is the draw of the. I don't think Wigan and Rovers could have sold any more tickets, so there needs to be a bigger drive from the RFL to try and reinvigorate the competition in terms of it being the annual day out like it used to be, where people would go for the occasion, not for who was playing. To be fair credit to Rovers and Wigan, they drove the ticket sales to get it to where it was. So what captured me is going down on the train, going in King's Cross, getting on the tube, going down Olympic Way, being in the fan zone. It is an occasion. It really is a special occasion, and that convinced me, actually, the Challenge Cup don't need to move from Wembley. There just needs to be more of an effort to make that showpiece a bigger occasion than it is right now. And whether, I don't know, we need to reduce some of these. Look, we've been to Vegas, absolutely mind-blowing experience. I've just seen that Wigan, Warrington, Wakefield and that lot are going to Dublin. We've got Magic Weekend in a few weeks. Throw in the international calendar where you've got a Test series or you've got a World Cup. You've got Grand Final. You've got semi. There seems to be what's becoming apparent is that it's the same pool of supporters who are getting the money drawn out of them. And what we're not doing a good enough job or better job of is bringing in new people, so then it's not relying on the same people putting their hands in the pocket to go support these games. So that's why, Scott, I'd say keep the Challenge Cup at Wembley, but bloody hell, let's make an effort to get more people in that stadium to make it a showpiece event.
Yeah, and I think the thing is as well is that you can't stop players of the present day and players in the future having their moment at Wembley either, regardless of what the crowd is. It's been a player's pinnacle of their careers for since the final's been at Wembley since 1929 to play in the Challenge Cup final. All the Aussies and the Kiwis all dream of playing at Wembley in the Challenge Cup final. It's the RFL that have actually destroyed it from being the occasion that it is by bringing all these extra, heavily reliant on the grand final being the showpiece game now. Magic Weekend, as you say, we've now got Vegas. There's only so much money that people have got. I was amazed at the amount of support we took because with City being at Wembley the week before and taking 30,000 down to Wembley, and there's so many City and Rovers fans who've had to fork out 2 weekends on the trot. And don't forget, there was no 1895 Cup final this year either. I think York and Featherstone last year could probably add 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 onto the gate. That's not there. The days of all the amateur clubs and pubs and clubs across the north of England all taking a coach or a minibus, that doesn't happen anymore. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but I would rather charge school kids around the London area, Wembley area, £5 each just to fill the stadium. Just go and enjoy it. Let's fill the stadium with kids. They're trying to promote the game. Not been trying to promote the game in London since 1980, haven't they? But at the end of the day, it'd be nice just to try and maybe get a load of school kids in and fill the upper tier if need be. Why not? anything just to make it viable, just to make sure that the stadium's full, and to make sure that the Rugby League Challenge Cup final is still a major, major event in the Rugby League calendar. And I believe a lot of the fans still believe it is, of the clubs. But you're told that the grand final is the be-all and end-all now, you know, and it's put a demoraliser on the Challenge Cup in a little bit for me, you know. But it's still one of the most important competitions to win for me, the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, and I mean, don't forget as well, I mean, that was with Wigan and Rovers in the Challenge Cup final. God forbid, you know, you get a final where it's, you know, got some of the lesser teams. If you had a Huddersfield there, or you had a not necessarily Wakefield, maybe Castleford or a Hull FC, someone like that, like one of the smaller teams, you know, the attendance would be much less, wouldn't it? So it's something we've got to factor in going forward. But look, let's draw a line under the Challenge Cup final. It's something that, for whatever reason, like we said, like we spoke about, when we get beat, we don't just get beat, we get proper beat. And that's hopefully not going to happen again this season. Of course, we've got Wakefield up next in the Super League, which is going to be another huge game. But before we talk about anything else that's to come, let's bring in Steve Till for Robins Revisited.
Hi Chris, and I noticed as I'm recording this piece that it's been announced that Rovers are playing their Warrington game, their outstanding game against Warrington, on in August, and it comes between two matches against Catalans at home and Toulouse at home. So we're going to have 3 home games in 9 days, and a lot of people are complaining. They're saying it's ridiculous. Well, if they think that's ridiculous, wait till they hear this, because I'm going to go back to the winter of 1963, when Rovers played 11 games in 22 days. Now, what a winter 1963 was. I'm old enough to remember it, and there'll be a few old-timers like me that will remember it. Snow began falling just around Christmas time, and it never stopped. It didn't stop until February. And the roads were frozen, there were snowdrifts 6, 7, 8 foot high, and there was no way that any played. So the first game after December the 22nd, and Rovers played Huddersfield, beat Huddersfield 3-0 on that day, a home game. The next game they played was against Widnes on February the 16th. But it's jumping up to May that I'm going to go, because this week in May and June, on June the 1st, Rovers ended that run of 11 games in 22 days. Now, up until summer rugby, I don't ever recall rugby being played in June. But it was on this occasion, because Rovers played Warrington and beat them 18-13 at Craven Park. But as I say, it was a run of 11 games in 22 days. That run began away at Wigan, where we were beaten 19-15. We then had a home game against Castleford, which we won 32-18, and we won the next game away at across at the Boulevard. We beat them 19-5. But then came a run of 4 losses. We were away at Leeds, where we got beat 13-3. Lost at Wigan 34-12. And then we played Workington, long trip to Workington in those conditions, and we lost 39-3. And at Oldham's old watershedding ground, when it was cold, it was freezing. Anyway, we lost 11-5 there. But then we got revenge over Leeds at home, 34-11. Away at St Helens, we lost 15-16, but we'd beaten St Helens 3-2 earlier in the season, so on aggregate it was all square there, just 1 point victory for each team. And we ended our run of 11 games in 22 days at home to Workington, who we beat 29-2, and then at home to Warrington, and we beat 18-13. So all those people who thought it's going to be tough in August, well, remember, we used to have 3 games in 2 days over Easter. Thank God that's gone now. But 11 games in 22 days. And Rovers finished halfway down the league ladder. But it was a heroic performance to be able to play all those games. And it didn't just apply to Rovers, it applied to everybody. Anyway, things have got much, much better now. Summer rugby, and anybody who says we ought to go back to winter, I think they need their bumps feeling, because the winter game, we used to play in thick mud, we used to play in snow, we used to play on hard grounds when it was icy, and the crowds just weren't there either. We've got far bigger crowds in summer than we ever did in winter. Anyway, onward and upward now. We've got Wembley out the way. Let's concentrate and let's go on and try and retain the league leaders trophy.
Thanks for that, Steve Till. James, before we talk about Wakefield, Steve mentioned it there about that rearranged fixture against Warrington, which is going to take place on Tuesday, the 18th of August. Of course, that is sandwiched in between a game against Catalan and Toulouse. We're going to play Catalan on Thursday, the 13th of August, and then we're going to play Toulouse on Saturday, the 22nd of August. I mean, when you look at it, it's not worked out too bad for the Robins, has it, in terms of having 3 games on the road, 2 of them against teams who are having to take a flight across to England. It was never going to be pretty. It was never going to be perfect, but it's probably the best we could have hoped for.
Yeah, like I say, it was always going to be difficult to fit it in. We knew it was going to be a struggle. Probably not to diss Toulouse, but you could, because we play Wigan the week after on another Thursday night game, so we've got 3 Thursday nights on the trot. You could potentially rest a few players against Toulouse. I know that's not Willie Peters' style, but potentially he might have to do that this time. But it's just a price of success, isn't it? It's a. And I've had this problem, love to have had this problem years ago. We've got this problem now, trying to fit these games in. We'll take it as it comes in. But it just also, I think, just shows as well probably the lack of foresight when it comes to planning these fixtures. When you look at the NRL, when they have the Origin games, they basically have split weekends. We know there was going to be a World Championship weekend this year. We know there's going to be a semi-final weekend and a cup weekend final weekend next year. Surely it's not beyond the wit of the RFL to sort of say, actually, we're going to have a split weekend. So at least it gives clubs a free weekend to actually then fit anybody who plays the World Championship a chance to fit that extra game in at a weekend. So you're not having to sort of jiggle other fixtures around. But that probably requires common sense, and common sense in the RFL don't tend to go in the same sentence together, do they? Very often. So like I say, it's probably the best of the worst solution, best of a bad solution, bad situation. But as I said, I'd rather be in this position than having played. Was it every week for the last 2 years? Well, missing 2. We had 2 weekends. We missed in 2023, haven't we? I'd rather have this current situation than set the players sat twiddling the thumbs because they've been knocked out of the cup in the 4th round or something.
And we'll see what they do next year, of course, when we play the World Club Challenge once again. So it'll be interesting to see if they've learned lessons in 2027. Got some more club news, of course. I mean, it's been talked about for so long, hasn't it? Jack Brown finally announced that he was departing the Robins, and then, of course, announced that as we record the Robin Pod now, he's joining Castleford. His last appearance for the Robins was in a Challenge Cup final, and famously, he is a Hull KR supporter, and he is someone who was languishing at a lower league side, who's coming to the Hull Kingston Rovers fold and lived the dream. Really, he's lived the dream in terms of being in them big games, being part of them, part of that big squad, earning a wage, wearing the famous red and white, lifting trophies. And for me, you know what? It's been a pleasure watching him when he's played. He's not anyone who's don't get me wrong, he's probably not pulled up any trees, but at the same point, he's never really let us down either. And it goes with our best wishes, I think.
Absolutely. Every time Jack's pulled on the red and white shirt, he's given everything for the badge and for the shirt. You know, being a Rovers fan from being a young lad, you know, that he's lived his dream. And I think, as his mum said on social media as well, his family have lived their dream through Jack as well over the last couple of years. You know, to see their team win every trophy available and their son be a part of that must be so... What an unbelievable feeling that is for his family and for Jack himself. He's never let the team down. Maybe he should have had more minutes and more game time over the years, maybe over the last couple of years. But when he has been called upon, he's never let the team down. You know, he gives everything for the shirt, for the badge, for the team that he loves. A player, what's Jack, 25, coming to 25 now, I think. He needs to be playing every week, doesn't he? He needs to be having a regular game time. Rovers can't offer him that. But Castleford can, and he'd already signed for Cas for next season anyway, I believe. So he's just going half a season earlier into. But we wish him all the very best, and he goes with all our blessings. But he goes as a champion. He goes as a world champion. He goes as a Challenge Cup winner. You know, he goes as a league title winner and a grand final winner and a Challenge Cup winner. That just, you know, to have that on your CV for the team that you support, that you played for, must be an unbelievable feeling.
Yeah, and as a side note, it's funny that he's probably played the most minutes over the last few weeks than he has previously in during his time at the Robins. Just very quickly, James, it was really interesting as well to see Pangai Jr. not only warming up and going through a fitness run on the Wembley pitch, but it was actually suited up with the boys as well and part of the travelling party. And Willie Peters, prior to the Challenge Cup final, did say that he'd maybe been struggling with what I think it was a calf or hamstring injury, but he had sort of penciled in the Wakefield game to be where we might see him play. And the fact that he was part of that travelling squad, he was part of the setup at Wembley, does give a nod to the fact that he could well be lining up, running out at Wakefield Trinity on Saturday.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because obviously Dino's going to be out with his to the HIS, and don't know, you know, obviously then Jack's gone to Cas now, so yeah, we could be doing with another forward coming in. I don't know whether Jai's missus has had the baby yet, so we might have Jai back, so that'd be good. But now I can see Pangai Jr. playing on, or he's coming off the bench on Saturday. And it'll be interesting to see how he goes. I think, you know, Willie Peters intimated, hasn't he, in the press for the last sort of day, so that he's definitely in his thoughts for Wakefield. And I think when in the past when Willie said things like that, it tends to happen.
Yeah, and you know, if Jai Whitbread, we really hope that everything's gone to plan, and we do see him line up at Wakefield, because that means everything has gone to plan. Willie Peters is a big family man, isn't he? And I can understand why he afforded Jai that luxury of being able to spend his time with his family at a really important time for them. So hopefully we'll see him at Wakefield. I didn't mention it too much, Scott, during the analysis of the Challenge Cup final defeat to Wigan, but there's no doubt whatsoever Mikey Lewis and that ankle foot injury did impact him. And as we record this early on in the week, we don't know the squad news, but it'd be interesting to see what happens there with Michael Lewis, won't it? Because at one point, everyone was fearing the worst. He looked like he was shot. He was going to be out the game. Of course, we saw him then hobbling round, and we even had reports of him after he picked up his the losers medal. He was still hobbling down the steps. At the same point, though, Scott, when I look at some of them Wigan players breaking through, who was the last player chasing down them players? It was Mikey Lewis. So I don't know where he's at with that injury. And do you think with having the likes of Ryan Hampshire, Jack Charles, if he ain't 100%, is it a time to maybe take him out the firing line and give him that time if he's injured?
If he's injured, yeah, you've got to. I think, he might need a bit of recovery as well. Even if he has, even if he's just rolled his ankle, it can be 2 or 3 days later before you actually feel it and feel the swelling and the bruising and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know how he got through the game. He was literally on one leg. And when he came back out for the second half, you're thinking, what's he doing out there? But he did seem to somehow kind of run it off. It wasn't as bad as it was in the first half. But, I mean, I don't know whether none of us were privy to this, whether he had a painkilling injection at half time or what. None of us know, but it didn't look good when he did it, and there was at one point he put his hand up to the bench to say I'm done, but somehow he ended up staying on. I don't think it changed the result or anything like that, even if it had brought Bill Leyland on at 9 and moved just into the half. But it was surprising that he did stay on, especially if he was injured. I can't contemplate why that would be the case. We know he's a talisman and we know he can do it and turn it on, and he is a match winner for us. But if he's injured, I don't see the point in keeping an injured player on the field, especially at Wembley. I can't get my head around that at all. So it was a bizarre one for me to see him play the full game, especially when the game had gone and he stayed on right till the end. Just a funny one, that.
Yeah, and James, I saw a few people draw comparisons to Gavin Miller when he was out there. I mean, different circumstances, but I've seen a few people say that he should have just gone off. But when you look at our interchanges and our bench, I don't think we had that luxury of just pulling Mikey Lewis off and going. I know we had Leyland and you could put Litton into the halves. But I don't think it was as simple as that, because at the time when he had that injury and then looking who else was around, it'd have been a big call to hook him, and if he's saying that he can get around the pitch, then you back your players as well, don't you? And like I said, some of them last ditch tackle efforts, it was Lewis who was the last man chasing them down.
Yeah. Yeah, you see, you got the players know their own bodies, don't you, like you say, but it did look bad one, and I just thought at the time probably best to bring him off. Maybe just to give him off to get a bit of ice on it, rest it a bit, then at least put say Litton to half and Leyland at hooker, just to sort of maybe freshen it up a bit. Because to be fair, Mikey, I don't think he was having his most effective game ever. From so he might have just freshened things up a bit. It's all ifs and buts and maybes, isn't it? So if he's fit this weekend, will he play? Probably will do. Should he play? I don't know. Maybe it's his time. Worth giving Jack Charles a run out, because we've signed him. We know he's got the potential. Give him the chance to go and show what he can do.
Yeah, it's very hard though, because I was just thinking as well, Scott. Though he'd be going to that game cold because he's not going on the back of a reserve game. He'd literally be have to back up with train. But hey, who knows? Who knows? And we know that Willie Peters likes to play his strongest team available. And hey, look, I hope Mikey Lewis is playing against Wakefield. Yeah. He's one of our best players. So why would we not want him to play? Yeah. That said, there is obviously just a concern around what happened on Saturday against Wigan, and just making sure that he is right, because he put in. It was tough for him. Finally, before we just concentrate on Wakefield a little bit more, as good as Tyrone May's been, Scott, he wasn't great on Saturday. But then I looked at how Wigan nullified him, and I don't necessarily think it might have been Tyrone May's fault that he wasn't able to get away. He wasn't able to play the game that he's been doing for the last few weeks for us.
He was behind a pack that was steamrolling as well, though, wasn't he? So it's very difficult for, no matter how good your halfbacks are, if you pack steamrollers and they're not setting you a grounding and a footing to get on the front foot, it's really, really difficult. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't the Tyrone of past weeks. I mean, he's been the talisman for me. He's been player of the season so far as Tyrone May. Plays the game in a dinner suit. But it was beaten behind a beaten pack on Saturday, and we all know what Tyrone can do. I think we just need to put Saturday down to it was just an awful day at the office by most people, by the club, by the players. It for whatever reason, it didn't work. We were beaten by a far superior team, and as we said earlier, we were just put to bed and move on.
Okay, before we've got Wakefield coming up, we're going to talk about that, but there's lots of questions that people have sent in for question time. So let's dig into them, and that'll lead us to Wakefield away on Saturday. Okay, as ever, we invite your questions on social media, and these are questions that you want us to answer. Some of these are about the Challenge Cup final on Saturday, some of these are about Hull Kingston Rovers in general, and of course, some of these are about Wakefield on Saturday. We've just talked about it, Scott. Julie Rodman, great follower of the Robin Pod, she says, would you have taken Mikey off at Wembley?
Yeah. Simple answer, yeah.
Right, Matt Kempy says, do you think we're now looking at a big rebuild of the squad in the next couple of years, especially the forwards where most are over 30? And do you think we'll continue to be at the top during that time, or maybe have a few less successful seasons? I suppose, James, we're in a bit of a flux, aren't we? And Paul Lakins alluded to it, the fact that recruitment for next season, the season beyond that, is based on who the head coach is. Now, we don't have a head coach for next season, which means that we're in a little bit of a flux, aren't we, in terms of recruitment. That said, my opinion, although the head coach is very important, my opinion is, should we be looking beyond the head coach in terms of which players we need to bring in? I don't know. Or should the head coach be central and be making them decisions about who comes in 2027 and 2028?
It is an interesting one. I think sometimes you've got to trust, what's gone on with Willie Peters, because I think obviously signed a few players onto extended contracts and longer term deals, etc. I think if you look at who we've got out of contracts at the end of this season, I don't think there's a lot of players, senior players out of contracts. I think there's a few of the sort of younger lads who are out, but I think of the senior ones, I think obviously Rhys Martin's already said he's retiring anyway. I think Jesse Sue's out of contract, and Peter Hickey signed a 1-year deal. So there's only really what's going to happen to Jesse Sue, whether he feels they can go around again. Maybe he's waiting to see who the coach is, and so see how that conversation with the incoming coach. But it's interesting. I think that they obviously signed Pangai Jr. just till the end of the season. It's almost like giving him the potential to prove himself, to say, look, Martin, we know Martin's going, so we know we've got a quota spot free. It's open to you. If you want to, if you do what put the effort in, put the performances in, etc. That spot could be you for the next 2 to 3 years, sort of thing. So yeah, it is an interesting one. I suppose they'll probably, as part of that, the discussions and interviewing process, they probably will be seeing what the potential coaches' views are on incoming and who they would like to potentially look to sign. So that groundwork may already be already going. And I think from what Paul Lakin was saying, it's probably we should know in the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks or so who the new coach is going to be.
Yeah, it's a funny one that as well, isn't it, Scott, around Willie Peters and Papua New Guinea, because Rhys Martin is going to join the Papua New Guinea Chiefs as their football operations manager. Now, so it's funny how he's... does that mean he's Willie's boss now? Or so, yeah, but it's a funny dynamic.
The Prime Minister's his boss, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't know what that makes him. Does it make him Willie's boss, or is he on par with Willie, or I don't know.
Matt Baxter, Scotty says, would you like to see Jack Charles, Tom Whitehead and Harvey Horn play more this season? Of course, we did see Tom Whitehead featuring quite on a number of occasions, didn't we, at the start of the season? Yeah. He seems to have then obviously gone out the window. Jack Charles has been pretty anonymous. We saw Harvey Horn line up a few times, particularly in the Challenge Cup. And hey, I'd love to see him play, but at the moment, if there's a first team player in front of you and they're fit and ready, it's very hard to displace them, I think.
Yeah, of course it is. And what we're seeing as well is that they're not playing enough reserve games to force their way into the team either. This is the problem. You just mentioned there that they're not playing matches, so it becomes really, really difficult to force their way into the team. But unless there's injuries, we know that Willie always goes with his strongest 17. He always has done. So he ain't going to change now. Halfway through a season with only half a season to go, he's going to play his strongest team that he's got. And I think these lads, I don't think they're really going to play that much game time under Willie Peters towards the end of his tenure, unless players get injured. But the issue for me, as I've always said it, is that there isn't a decent enough reserve league, where the old A-team league, where all these kids were playing every single week, and senior pros that were coming back from injury, they were playing with internationals and, big experienced fellas who could guard them around the pitch, and they were learning off them and things like that. That doesn't exist anymore. Without a full proper reserve league and a full A-team league, these guys just can't get game time unless they go on these 1 week loans to clubs or a couple of weeks here and there. So they're never going to find game time, because they're never going to be fit enough to play at Super League level, I don't think. This is the problem.
Yeah, and to be fair, Sean Michael, who's a great follower of the Robin Pod, he's asked a question about rotation and should Willie Peters be doing more to rotate and make sure that more youngsters are coming through. I think we've answered that question in the discussions we've had, but it does say, James, he says, Mikey Lewis managing his injuries. Why do Hull KR appear so reluctant to replace Michael Lewis when he's clearly carrying an injury during a game? We've seen on several occasions where he has stayed on despite being visibly hampered, and it arguably cost KR at the weekend. Is this a player-driven decision, a coaching decision, or a bizarre lack of trust in the alternative? Should the club be more proactive in protecting its most influential player, even if it means taking him off earlier? We've just spoke about that, haven't we?
Yeah.
But there does seem to be a reluctance to basically have him off the field.
It does, and that's actually, I think, a lot that goes back to Willie Peters' philosophy. I'm going to play my strongest, team. Come what may, and I was going to work around that. But yeah, it does. Although it was interesting when they played Wigan the other week in Super League, and he came out and he had a strapping on his thigh, and I texted the missus and I said you should see the amount of strapping that Mikey Lewis has got on his thigh. Has he got an injury? And it just made me thinking after then, and the way it was at Wembley, and maybe there was something there, but it's a difficult one because he's one of those players, isn't he, who can just be fairly quiet in a game, and just all of a sudden in a split second turn a game on its head. And I think that's probably what for Willie Peters the attraction is that unpredictability of him, but also he's probably just keeping a settled team as well. It's a difficult one. But sometimes you got to think, you got to give some of these fringe players a game to just get them into the routine and get that match fitness. Because as Scott said, you haven't got that reserve grade happening on a regular basis. And I remember you used to watch the A team back in the day, and it was a pretty good standard. You had kids coming through the curls up into the reserves. You had players coming back from injury. Then you were playing some pretty decent teams in those days, and it was a good standard, good standard, and we just haven't got that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues the game's got at the moment. But that's just a different story, isn't it? But yeah.
Scott, Robin Pod regular Bazza, he says, in light of the defeat at Wembley, I felt we lost our identity. We were indisciplined. We didn't look like ourselves. I get we were fatigued and we had adversity in the game with Hadley and Mikey, but do you believe we should be better in these situations? My question is, do we need a bit of a shake-up in the squad?
It's a tough question, that, isn't it? It's a tough question. Yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, you can have all the shake-up that you want, but when you're in a salary cap sport, you haven't got a lot of leeway without letting a player go, hence the Jack Brown leaving and Bangai Jr. coming in. That's the reason Jack's had to leave ultimately. So when you're in a salary cap sport, you don't have a lot of movability when you're actually at your salary cap. That's the problem. In regards to identity, I think a lot of Rovers indiscipline that they did on Saturday, a lot of that was down to Wigan's quality, I think. And, we were getting caught in the ruck and getting penalised for ruck infringements. And ultimately, that they were playing the game a lot faster than we were. We've done that to teams week in, week out all last season. We got loads of...
I was going to say, Scott, Wigan played our game against us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Bullied us.
Yeah. So we were giving 6 agains and ruck infringements away, but teams were doing it for fun against us last season because we were dominating teams. We just got dominated by Wigan, and ultimately it results in you ending up giving penalties and 6 agains away. And you can argue all you want about a referee can give a 6 again for whenever he fancies it and whoever he wants to give it against. But ultimately, if you're behind the black ball and you're getting absolutely battered by a team, you're going to end up giving 6 agains and penalties away. It's as simple as that, because you're just not at the same level as the team or your opposition is. So I would say we'd lost our identity. The only way we lost our identity is that we didn't play the game that we know we can play, and Wigan played our game against us. That's where we lost the identity.
Yeah, I think you're right. The discipline on Saturday wasn't great, but that's probably because Wigan were forcing us to play like we did. But just go back to Baz's comment about do we need a rebuild? I think it's again.
Well,
it's good.
Baz said. I think what Baz was saying is, do we need a bit of a shake-up?
Shake-up. Sorry, say shake-up. Yeah, it's almost like I said, we've said, Winnipeg is not to play his strongest team. It's almost like you're bringing in players when you've got somebody who's out injured. And one of our strengths, touch wood, has been, we've been fairly good in injuries. And I just look at Wigan and using Jack Farman as an example. He's only been come in because Bevan French was injured, and he's taken his chances. He's probably, you can tell he's a top class potential player anyway. That's now given Matty Pete a headache about does he bring Bevan French back in or keep with Fireman? And this is when you get those adverse situations that you bring those players in, that gives you that shake up, that gives you that freshness. Same with Hodkinson on the wing coming in for Marshall and Miskey over the time. Is that adversity that you get from injuries that fortunately we've not had, and when you got your coach who wants to keep his strongest team going if they're fit, then it's good that you're always going to have that tension.
Yeah, I say what, James, that's a great point about, look, these Super League sides where everyone's crowing about the youngsters, look, these youngsters aren't being promoted into the team in front of a first teamer who's fit. They've been promoted into that team because they're the next one.
Injured.
The first team player's been injured.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, the success is that our strength and conditioning team do such a good job with the players that we don't need to call in, players from the academy or younger players. Obviously, the irony is we've just gone and signed Ryan Westerman from that lot to backfill. And Cameron Bibby, he says, with the signing of Westerman from that lot, as well as Broadbent and Booth, clearly ahead of him, it's quite a niche question. Is this the end of the road for Louis Gorman at Rovers? He's signed that free. Do you know what? For me, what was the end of the road for Louis Gorman was when he penned that 3-year deal, and then I think we played London Broncos in London, and I can't remember who got injured, and then they played James Batchelor at centre instead of putting Gorman into the side, and I thought, well, hang on, there's no way, and I think you said it, Scott. Look, Willie Peters very much as his 13 players he wants to pick for that first team. Then he has the backup players, the interchange bench, and I dare say he's probably not that bothered about the academy. He's here to win a trophy. He's here to win several trophies. He's here to bring success to a club. He's not here to blood youngsters into the side. He's here to win. Yeah. And if that means, that's why Ryan Hampshire's here. That's why we brought in Jordan Desaria. That's why we've got backfilled with Declan Murphy. That's why Tom Whitehead's here. You know, ultimately, he's here to win trophies. But that's also, Scott, the mantra was set. Bring success to all Kingston Rovers. And he's done it his way.
Absolutely, and he's done that. You know, Willie's going to leave the club as a winner at the end of the day. He came in to do a job, win his trophies, and he won as a quadruple. You know, a treble and the World Club Championship. You know, many people say we've been very, very lucky with injuries compared to other teams. Maybe we have, as you've just alluded to there, John. A lot of that's down to our conditioning team and our physios and things like that, making sure that players are ready to play. But at the end of the day, he will always play his strongest team, always. And I don't think that he has any sort of view on the academy. I really don't. But in that, I don't know if that's a sustainable thing that we can do forever. You know, if you look at Wigan on Saturday, Zach Eckersley, Farrimond, Hodkinson, all these kids have come through their system, their academy, and they're in the first team, and they don't even look out of place, do they? It's like they've played forever. You know, until we get a load of injuries and we have to play a lot of these kids, we don't know how good they are. But they're certainly never going to play ahead of a first choice player, never in a million years. So you're in a situation where it's a case of, you know, Willie's coming to do a job. He's won every trophy in the game and he goes away a winner. Whether the new coach, when he comes in, will have a different outlook and a different view on the academy and bringing kids through the system, we don't know. But if the niche is go and win trophies, it's always going to be senior pros that win your trophies, isn't it? Always. But then on the Wigan argument, Eckersley, Hodgkinson, Farrimond, etc., et al., they've gone and absolutely destroyed us on Saturday and gone and won a trophy with 3 or 4 kids in the team. So I think we've got to get our academy somehow up and running and getting kids through the system somehow. But how we do that, I don't know.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, this is a discussion for another Robin pod about how maybe clubs should be rewarded and then incentivized to actually protect their academy, to bring through their academy players. So Wigan, for example, what was that stat? 20% of players in Super League now have come through Wigan's academy. I'm sure I saw that a couple of weeks ago, which is unbelievable. But at the moment, Wigan are in a position where Abbas Miski can't play for them because they can't put him on the salary cap. And some of them players like Farrimond are being paid peanuts, really. And if someone comes in with a bigger offer, they're off. So, look, it's a discussion. So what I'm saying is, from a Rovers point of view, actually, there isn't that much of an incentive right now. If you're chasing success and you can bring in what players you need, it doesn't matter whether they come through the academy or not, because you're not incentivized to do it. So we'll see how that pans out. Scott, we've got Wakefield on Saturday. It's not going to be an easy game. Wakefield have been rested. They're prime. They're really pushing for a playoff spot. They're pushing probably on a good day to go for a top 4 spot. Yeah. So it's not going to be an easy game. We've got a bit of an indifferent record at Bellevue right now, haven't we? We're not always at our best there. It's probably not the game we wanted on the back of Saturday's performance. No. That said, like we said earlier on in the Robin pod, we do seem to get back on the horse when we need to. Are you expecting a big response on Saturday?
I think I'd like a big response, but I think Wakefield will be the incentive for Wakefield, especially losing John Kear now. He was a massive coach at Bellevue for Wakefield. You know, they'll want to do it for John and his family as well, I'm sure. Not that they need any incentive to do it for him, because they're a good side in their own right, and they're a very difficult team to beat at Bellevue. We know that. And they've got some good players. They're well coached by Powell. They're filling the stadium nearly every game now, So they've got, there's a bit of a revival at Wakefield now, aren't they, under this new owner and what have you. And it's always a really difficult place to go. It always has been. It's never an easy place to go, Bellevue. Even when I was watching Rovers through the late 70s until the 80s and into the 90s, difficult place to go. They always turn up Wakefield generally. I mean, they are known to have an off day. Don't get me wrong, that Wakey can have an off day, but generally they're a very, very difficult team to beat, especially on their own ground. But I'm not bothered about what Wakefield do. I want to see a response from Rovers. I want to see us, if we've got aspirations to be winning the League Leaders' Shield again and challenging for the grand final, then you've got to go to places like Wakefield and win. And if it's like the league game a couple of weeks ago, we're under the cosh, but we win the game by 4 points. So be it. I want to see a response from Rovers. Not too much bother about what Wakefield do. We know they're a good side. Let's see a response from Rovers.
Yeah, I mean, James, we had a kick up the backside from York. We had a kick up the backside from Leeds. We had a kick up the backside from Catalans, and now we've had another kick up the backside from Wigan. We don't know the squad as we record this Robin pod. And fingers crossed we've come through that Challenge Cup final unscathed, albeit apart from Dean Hadley. The boys will be chomping out the bit to get out there, won't they, and to right them wrongs. They'll feel like they probably let themselves down, let alone the fact that they let maybe I don't want to say let the team down, but they didn't perform to the levels that they used to. So they'll be smarting and they'll want to get out there and do something. And maybe they need a tough game. They need to go back into the fight, chuck themselves into the fire to go, no, this is what this Rovers team is about.
No, I agree. I think, they'll be smarting. Hopefully this week they've been, just chomping at the bit of training just to sort of put things right. They know they didn't play the Rovers way on Saturday. That's gone now. We've still got, we're still the champions. We've still got a League Leaders' Shield in the cabinet at Craven Park. We want to go out and defend that. And, I think there will be a response on Saturday. I think you also look back to how, Wakefield just hammered us last year. I think, a lot of those players played that night. They'll want to put that right as well. But, like I say, it's going to be hard because Wakefield have rested. They've been, probably... I wouldn't say a surprise package this season because I thought, I knew they'd do well this season. I think it's been watching them play. They play a really good rugby. Like I said, they're well coached, defend well. We've got some really good players in that team. It's going to be tough, but I think we're going to come. We've got to come out. We've got to come out with a response, and I'm expecting the response from on Saturday.
Yeah, it's funny because Wakefield. Do you know what? There's been a lot of talk about Wakefield, and as good as they've been. Probably the best performance was against Leeds Rhinos in the Challenge Cup. They haven't been pulling up too many trees, so I don't want to blow too much smoke up there because they've been better. They've got some really good players, but they haven't been great. So anyway, we'll see on Saturday, won't we? There's no doubt whatsoever the Robins will be backed by another bumper following. If you're going to the game, make sure you allow them proud. James, Scott, thank you for your contribution to what is the longest Robin pod of the season so far. It's amazing what a defeat can do, isn't it? Not as long
as the cup final, though, was it?
Yeah.
5:10.
Yeah, lots to get off our chest. But yeah, we go again, don't we? And this Robin side, we'll keep backing them and in their pursuit of glory. Don't forget, we're powered by Budget Ties Auto Centre, the only car specialist trusted by the players, club officials and supporters of Hull Kingston Rovers. For now, live, love, laugh and be happy.
This is the Robin Pod. Throughout the years, whatever the game, the Red Army's passion is always the same. Decades pass, now we rise anew. Rovers fans, this pod is for you. We won the cup, we ruled the league. Grand final win made us all believe. The world took note with Chris Ben's fall. The Robins superb, now we won it all. Red Army, let's hear you sing with all your might. For your world champions in the red and white. We are okay, and we are the champions of the world.